Howdy doody, my name is Cameron, better known as Venus Theory. This is the UVI YouTube channel, and in this video, I'm excited to show you around the new Sparkverb 1.5 update. If you know me, then you know I'm a big reverb guy. In fact, it was said as a child, the first time I cried, it was solely to study the early reflections of the room, and I've been hopelessly hooked on reverb ever since. Sparkverb 1.5 is a major overhaul to the UI of Sparkverb that also includes some new factory presets while still featuring its signature algorithms and lightweight DSP to bring everything from subtle rooms to massive washes of gooey reverby goodness to your sessions. Right away, as you can see, the interface of Sparkverb has been totally refreshed, and this takes some design notes from Bloom, UVI's other reverb. However, it still features all the same controls, and they are in more or less the same positions. That being said, it sounds totally different than Bloom, but I do think through the power of friendship, they can coexist as two complementary sorts of expressive reverbs in your sessions. All the core controls are on the main page here, and of course you can access the preset Voyager with the icon in the upper right. We have the A/B functions, the randomizer, and the preset mutator. And as before, you can lock any of the parameters of Sparkverb as you go through the Voyager, the randomizer, or the mutator by right-clicking a parameter and selecting to lock it. This will prevent that control from changing as you go about your adventures in the land of reverb. Outside of the interface update, everything else remains exactly the same as it was before. So instead of just walking through the parameters, I wanted to show you a couple different ideas and tips when using Sparkverb so that you can get the most out of it in your sessions with this new update. So here we are in a session for a game soundtrack I'm working on, and I wanted to show a couple different case uses and ideas with Sparkverb just to use it in different contexts within a mix. First up, I want to talk about the different modes of Sparkverb. So here I've got it set up on a piano coming from Aurora, and completely dry it sounds like this. As we bring in Sparkverb, we get that gooey, reverby goodness. But the modes are important because they can significantly impact the overall sound, and Sparkverb has three different modes: bright, dark, and lo-fi. If we set this to 100% wet and take a listen to the bright mode, we can hear that it adds a sense of top-end air and wash because the top end is more exaggerated in this algorithm. As you can hear, the bright mode leaves the top end of the reverb more intact over time. So I think this mode is useful for things like strings or drums or synths where you want to preserve that top end wash or maintain a sense of air in the background just to fill out the overall spectrum of a mix. Switching over to the dark mode, if we give that a listen, right away, I think you can hear the difference. The dark mode preserves the lower end of the reverb signal. So this is nice for adding a sense of space and dimension to things without cluttering up the high end. So I think this is nice on things like vocals or acoustic guitars that may have a lot of high end signal to them naturally, and you don't want that to build up and fill up the mix. This is also useful to engage if you're working with multiple instances of reverb in a session and you don't want a constant wash of effectively noise as all of it builds up over time. This is also great for things like vocals and acoustic guitars, because with things with a natural bit of sibilance, if you have too much high end, it can impact the overall clarity and intelligibility of the source signal. Moving on to the lo-fi mode, this is really in a realm of its own and seeks to emulate the sort of quirks and characteristics of things like vintage rack reverbs from the days of yesteryear. Let's give that a listen and hear what it sounds like. Right away, I think you can hear it's just kind of its own beast, and honestly, I think this sounds great on just about anything, so long as you don't mind a bit of the ghosts of reverb past. Moving on, let's talk a bit about diffusion and shape. These are actually two parameters that are very closely linked despite them being on opposite sides of the interface here. Right now I've got Sparkverb set up on a drum bus, and it sounds like this. So just a subtle sense of room to the overall drums. Cranking the mix up to 100% wet, let's disable the diffusion for now and just take a listen to how shape impacts the sound. If I just ping it with a snare drum and increase the shape, and play around with something like size a bit, you can hear what it's doing. It's effectively adding more walls to the space that the reverb is propagating in, while the size can affect the overall dimensions of the room. So something like this sounds pretty good, but you can hear there are some distinct kind of pingy artifacts overall, and this is where the diffusion comes in. Setting our shape down a bit, let's start with a low density diffusion, and what this is going to do is smooth out that pinginess to the reverb. So right now it sounds like this. As I change the start time and the amount, the characteristic of that changes, and as we change the shape, that of course also affects the overall sound. Now if we increase the density all the way up to high, you can hear it really smooths out the reverb overall. So playing with the shape and diffusion together can pretty significantly alter the characteristic of your reverb from something that's a little more smooth like this to something that's slightly more pingy like this. By playing with these parameters, you can access anything from a tight reflective room to a more diffused wash of something like a large hall. So playing around with the different controls and all the points in between them is well worth exploring if you want to really dial in the character of your reverb. Moving on, let's talk a bit about using the filters of Sparkverb. So just so you can hear everything in context right now, we're going to zone in on this acoustic guitar bus, but I'll just let the track play for a moment so you can get a sense of where everything is sitting. Overall, I think things sound good, but I do want to add some space to those acoustic guitars. So I've pulled up a preset here and we can just start mixing this in. And I think that sounds nice. However, that high end might be a little bit excessive because we do have a lot of other high end information coming in the mix with percussion and drums and things like that. So one very simple trick is just to engage the pass mode of the filter. So I'll play this and turn this on and you'll hear right away what changes. Now I know that might seem like a very obvious and simple trick, but it is something that's very easy to forget as you get into the weeds of a mix session. So let's play that back in context. I'm going to disengage the low pass mode and we'll hear the guitars, and there's just this big buildup of top end information that's not exactly pleasant in the context of the mix. So now let's bring in the pass mode. And literally with one click, we solved the entire problem with adding the reverb to the guitars while still maintaining a better sense of space to them. Last but not least, I want to talk about one of my favorite tricks with reverb, which is freezing them to create reverb tail pads. Reverb is one of my favorite pastimes, and I think this is a very pleasant way to lose an afternoon or an entire weekend to create some digital 90s and 2000s inspired sampled reverb tail pads, and we could do this with the freeze function of Sparkverb. All we really need to do is ping it with a single note. In this case, I'm just playing the note C so I know what note it is because we're going to resample this later. Inside of Sparkverb, I can just play the sound and hit freeze. And it'll infinitely hold whatever is in the reverb buffer for forever because it's frozen. And this is a super fun trick to resample them and then play them back as an instrument. The steps for doing this vary depending on your DAW, so I'm not going to get into that here, but basically I pinged this and hit the freeze button, and while I did that, I was live recording into another track in my DAW so that I can get a nice clean sample that I can trim up and import into a sampler. So let's bring it into Falcon. I dragged the sample into Falcon here, just made sure to set up my root note as C, and then trimmed the sample up a little bit as well as added a loop point, and that gives us this. Which right away, just a gorgeous sound. I think that's very fun. And then I brought in an analog filter with an LFO just for a little bit of movement to the pad. I think this on its own sounds great, but I brought in some extra reverb on top of that. And now I think we're really in business. To show how this sounds in context, in the middle section of this track, I thought this was nice, it just needed a little bit of extra something, so I brought in my resampled pad in Falcon here to lay underneath everything, and now we've got this. You can try this with any instrument or sample. You could do single notes, you could do chords, you could do little bursts of noise and create some cool bits of ear candy and backing texture to your tracks in a way that I don't really think you could do otherwise. So, you know, it's entirely up to you. Maybe consider this as your homework assignment from this video. It's a good time. Life is a highway. You should ride it all night long. And that is it for this video. Sparkverb 1.5 is available now, and if you're an existing Sparkverb user, it's a free update. You can go get it right now. Otherwise, if you want to check out Sparkverb for yourself, you could find it as a standalone product or as part of UVI's Sonic Pass or Sonic Bundle. That's been it for this video. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. Thank you to the UVI team for having me on the channel as always. And of course, say it with me. I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.